This episode is brought to you by my friends at ServiceNow, a software company that makes the world of work better for people by delivering digital workflows that create great employee experiences and unlock productivity. If you or your company is looking to transform old manual ways of working into digital workflows, then you need ServiceNow. They are trusted by over 6,200 enterprise customers. Check them out at servicenow.com. The world is changing quickly. What do you need to know and do in order to be successful now and in the future? From leadership to the future of work to employee experience, this show will give you the insights and the tools you need to succeed and thrive professionally and personally. Make sure to follow me on Spotify or subscribe to the show on your favorite platform. You can do so easily by going to futureofworkpodcast.com. Also, please rate the podcast on Apple Podcasts or whatever your preferred platform is. It really helps spread the word about the show, and I personally appreciate it. Welcome to the Future of Work with Jacob Morgan. I am your host, Jacob Morgan, and welcome to 2021. 2020 was a crazy year. Being stuck at home for most of the year with my wife, 2 dogs, 2 kids, and dealing with fires where you can't even breathe the air outside has been pretty hectic and stressful. But the best thing that came out of 2020 was that Blake, my wife, and I had a baby boy, Noah. So it wasn't all terrible. I'm also grateful that nobody in my family got sick, although a few members of my team and their families did get COVID, but thankfully everyone is doing okay now. 2020 also allowed Blake and I to really focus on creating digital products like courses and webinars. And look, as much as I miss traveling around the world and meeting new people and seeing all of your wonderful faces, there's still something to be said for being able to give a presentation in my sweatpants. But I suspect I'll be back on the road in some capacity at some point this year. We've also been really growing our Be Your Own Boss podcast, which is all about entrepreneurship, which you can check out if you're interested at byobpodcast.com. That's for all of you out there who are either entrepreneurs or who are thinking of becoming entrepreneurs. For the holidays, we drove down to LA in a minivan that we rented. And I have to admit, I did fight tooth and nail against getting a minivan, but as usual, my wife won that battle. Although it was nice to be with family for a few days, we are now back at home in the Bay Area. And I don't know about you, but I'm very, very excited for this new year and a new start to focus on growth, positivity, and creating some awesome content and products for all of you. In today's episode of the podcast, I wanted to actually take a look back and share some of the best leadership lessons and stories from podcast guests in 2020. I had the opportunity to speak with some truly amazing leaders like the co-founder of the Home Depot and CEOs from companies like Netflix, Honeywell, Smile Brands, Best Buy, and many others. And I was so inspired from these really amazing leaders and conversations, and I learned so much from them that I wanted to take some of my favorite stories, my favorite leadership lessons, and put them into a compilation. And I hope that you are going to learn just as much from these conversations as I did, and that you can apply some of these lessons learned inside of your organization and inside of your life as well. So you are going to actually hear 15 leadership lessons. And this is from 15 of some of my favorite conversations from 2020. And I will introduce each guest and what you will learn from them. And then you will actually hear from their own words. You'll hear a soundbite directly from them. And you will hear 15 of these leadership lessons. So let's start with Arthur Blank. He is the co-founder of the Home Depot, which is a home improvement retail chain, which today has a market cap of over $300 billion. And they have over 400,000 employees. Arthur has been named one of the world's 100 greatest living business minds by Forbes in 2017. Arthur owns the Atlanta Falcons NFL team and the Atlanta United soccer team. His family businesses also include the nationwide PGA Tour Superstore, 3 ranches in Montana, and Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which hosted the 2019 Super Bowl. Under his leadership, the Home Depot was voted America's most socially responsible company in 2001. And in this clip, you will learn about the importance of leading by example and that no matter how senior you become inside of your company, you're never better than any other human being who works there. It's a great lesson for work and for life.
Well, I'll give you one story about which I, talk about a little bit in the book. It goes back to the days of HD. I could talk about current ones as well. But the one at HD, we, for our listeners who may not know what a compactor is, it's what you use to take, you get all this corrugated material and inventory into a retail store and take the inventory out, you put it on the shelves or display it or whatever it may be, and you have all this corrugated material. So there's a lot of air. And for whatever reason, because of a startup company and, we're doing things on the fly and, we didn't get our compactors until like 2 weeks after we started to receive merchandise. And I was working in one of our stores and I had my sleeves rolled up like everybody else. And when our compactor came in, our receiving areas in our store had gotten so congested with all this corrugated material that we literally couldn't receive any more merchandise. So I spent, 24 hours in the store, literally, running the compactor and compacting all this material. And, one of the guys went up to the store manager and said, there's this nut in the back. He's been here for 24 hours, hasn't left. He's compacting all this stuff so we can get more merchandise in to get up on the shelves. I mean, I don't know who he is, but you ought to consider him for a promotion at some time. So the manager said, by the way, he's one of our founders. So, that's an example of leading by example. And I'll give you just another one. It's kind of funny. In our stadium, Steve Cannon is our CEO of all of our for-profit businesses other than our ranches. And Steve was in the stadium, and he has this program, you walk in my shoes, which basically means you do the work of a frontline associate. So he was running a concession stand. And at the concession stand, the way the French fries were being packaged and produced and sent down the delivery mechanism to the person who was given to the customer, about a third of the fries were falling out because the packaging wasn't done correctly. So Steve, obviously noticed that, and he went back, and we take great pride in our food and beverage because we do tremendous volumes. Our food and beverage pricing is at what we call street pricing, is half of what everybody else's is in America. So we do an incredible amount of volume in our stadium as a result of that. But we had to change the way the package was, and then all the fries that were being cooked and everything actually got delivered to the customer instead of half of them spilt in the conveying process. So, I mean, every business that I've been in, Home Depot is putting on an orange apron, walking the stores, talking to the customers, talking to the associates. When I go to our PGA Tour Superstore, walk around, talk to our customers. How are you being fitted? Is everything okay? You need anything? You want anything? And we don't, nobody's on commission. We're here to fit you with the best product that we can. And if you can't play like, Tiger Woods, we'll make sure you look like him. And we'll have all the apparel there to make sure that's the case, or whoever your favorite golfer is, male or female. So it's really, you lead by example by understanding. I'll give you one more quick one. It happened last summer at our guest ranch that we were open. I was sitting in the bar at night and having a drink, and I heard there were guests were packed in their place and in the place, and I heard a couple of guests saying, the restroom around the corner is plugged up, it's not working. So I didn't call anybody. I went in there and I flushed it and fixed the commode, and then I went down to just check on one of the other commodes, and there was one other one that was also stuck up, and I fixed that one. I didn't tell him. I just went back and sat down. Well, the next day, the associates at the ranch were saying, "Did you know the owner was fixing commodes last night?" And, and to me, it wasn't a big deal. I just, I didn't tell our guests because it's not important. But, it's important for the associates to feel there was no job beneath me, no job beneath the leader, whoever it may be.
Shelley Archambault is the former CEO of MetricStream, a Silicon Valley-based governance, risk, and compliance software company, and the author of a new book called Unapologetically Ambitious: Take Risks, Break Barriers, and Create Success on Your Own Terms. She's also on the board of Verizon and Nordstrom. Shelley shares an important lesson, which is all about creating your own luck, meaning taking more control over your personal and professional life and making things happen instead of leaving them up to chance. Here's Shelley. So create your own luck, I definitely want to go over because I think that's a very important concept for people to just understand that they have more accountability and control than they realize. So what does create your own luck actually mean, and how could that apply, you think, for a lot of people today who want to be in leadership roles?
So creating your own luck to me is positioning yourself so that when opportunity shows up, comes around, happens, you actually have the ability to take advantage of it.
Yeah.
So it's having, yes, the right skills, yes, the right experience, but I'll also tell you it's having the right attitude is a big piece of it as well. So that you're open, right, to the opportunity when it comes. And I've always believed that planning can also improve your odds to be lucky, for luck to happen. It's interesting when an example would be when going to Wharton. All right, so I decide that I want to be in business, so I need to go to Wharton, and I want to go to Wharton undergrad, which was very hard to get into, but I thought I could save myself from having to go to grad school, right? If I went to Wharton undergrad. Well, you could say I was lucky that I got in. Except even before I knew what I wanted to do, I was getting good grades because I knew I needed options, right? So yes, I was lucky, but frankly, I actually helped myself being lucky by making sure that I got good grades, was very involved in school, in the organizations, right? All those different things. Everything that happens when I set a plan, I try to assume it's going to happen and then do things to get ready for it. So when it does happen, I'm lucky that I can take advantage of it.
I think it was the CEO of Honeywell who I was interviewing on this podcast, and he was telling me that there's basically no substitute for hard work, or maybe it was at Home Depot. Somebody was sharing a story of how they went through several jobs where they were not happy. They had leaders who didn't treat them well, but they consistently focused on their performance and they consistently did really well. Because it's very easy if you're in an environment where you don't think people support you to slack off and then you never get promoted.
Exactly.
And he was telling me this story of, even though the environment wasn't great, he consistently worked hard, and then an opportunity opened up and they said, well, who's going to be a good fit for this opportunity? And they said, oh, so-and-so is working really hard. They're really great at this. That person should be promoted. So it very much reminds me of that idea of, just kind of waiting for the right moment. It's like what you see in all those movies, right? Like, wait for the right moment and then we strike. And it's just planning that whole time because you will get that opportunity.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, an example at IBM was when I got to IBM and I'm thinking everybody wants to be CEO, right? How am I going to differentiate myself? So I looked at what IBM did poorly, right? What was IBM not good at? And frankly, it was marketing. They didn't have a chief marketing officer. They called sales reps marketing reps, right? I mean, they didn't know what marketing was. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to major in marketing. And every staff opportunity, every project was marketing oriented. I did. Well, Lou Gerstner comes to IBM and says, there's no marketing. First job he hires, a chief marketing officer, Abby Comstam. She looks around and says, who are the people that know marketing? My first executive job was a marketing job.
Mark Randolph is the co-founder and founding CEO of Netflix, which is a company that we have all been using quite a bit during the pandemic, I'm sure. He also served on the board of Netflix up until 2003. And Netflix wasn't his only startup. He's founded or co-founded 6 other successful startups, and he's the author of the best-selling book, That Will Never Work: The Birth of Netflix and the Amazing Life of an Idea. We hear a lot about culture in the business world, but in this clip, you're going to hear how Mark defines and thinks about what culture is and what it isn't, how it actually manifests inside of an organization, and the impact that it has on those who work there.
Culture is not what you say. Culture is not what you put in a culture deck. Culture is not what you carve in your headstone. Culture is not something you sit around a table and brainstorm things like, what should our culture be? Culture is how you act. It's how you are. It's the things you do. And even more importantly, culture springs from how the founders and the early employees act with each other, with their employees, with their customers.
Yeah.
And so huge amounts of the Netflix culture arise organically from the way that Reed and I behave, the way that I treat people, the way I worked with people before. When we did Netflix, and I glossed over, I said, we raised the money, we got an office, we hired a dozen people. I didn't put ads for hiring people. This was more like that scene from the Blues Brothers movie where I'm driving around getting the band back together. So I'm going to these people who I've worked with before, or who I know well enough to know how they work. And you're finding these people who I know can work autonomously, who I know enjoy that, who I know enjoy the fact that they come to work not knowing what they're going to face, but will rise to the challenge of whatever happens. So I'm laying that out because you have to understand that what was there was there. That culture was just organically part of who we were. But you make a really good point, is that those attributes I was just describing about people having tremendous amounts of responsibility for their things, but wanting the autonomy to work by themselves, to really love having their job be different. That's an easy culture to maintain when you have a dozen people. But what happens is as companies get larger, it's very easy to lose that. At the beginning, and pardon me if I digress a little bit, but this is all about how you work with people. At the beginning, it's really easy to tell one of these chosen few and go, Christina, you see that mountain 2 miles away? I'll meet you there. And you know that here's the things you need to get accomplished. And she goes, got it. And then I don't even think about it again, because I know that 2 weeks from now, I will find Christina on top of the mountain, maybe bruised and bloodied, but she'll be there on time with everything she's responsible for, that she'll have solved every problem that came her way on her own without input from me. That's a great way of working. But what happens is when you get bigger, something happens where someone shows up late, or they show up, don't have everything done. And a lot of managers would say, oh, this isn't good. Okay, we can't have that happen again. Everybody, I want status reports. I need to know if there's going to be a problem in advance. So everyone status reports. And everyone goes, oh, status reports. And then someone else shows up and they're there on time with it all done, but they spent too much. And many managers will go like, oh, can't let that happen. Okay, I need everyone who spends more. I want to pre-approve anything over $100 to make sure you don't make a spending mistake. And then everyone goes, oh God, expense reports. And little by little, what you're doing is you're building a company to protect yourself from people with bad judgment. But what you're also doing is driving the people who have good judgment crazy. And so we kind of decided what would happen if we built a company that was for people with good judgment, people who loved having that freedom to make their own decisions, to be close to the action, to decide for themselves what the appropriate thing to do was, but had the responsibility of knowing that we counted on them to get those things done. And I will confess, we almost lost it, because as we got bigger, as hiring got to a point where I didn't know everybody anymore. They didn't all have contact with myself or with Reed.
Yeah.
You began to lose some of that inadvertently. And then we kind of had some problems, which I'm sure we can talk about in a little bit, that required us to have a layoff. And we needed to lay off nearly 40% of our company. And there was that classic managerial problem of saying, we're going to have to do everything we did before, but with 40% less people, this is going to be really hard. But instead, as we moved into that period, it was the opposite. It was fun. It was exciting. It felt like we were a startup again, because there was no time for the command and control. We were back to see you on the mountain in 2 weeks. And we had gotten the staff back down to the place where the only people there were the people with good judgment that we could trust, that wanted to work that way. And that, I think, is the point where we said we have to be actively trying to maintain this culture. We have to call each other on it when we're not doing this. And then began that longer process led by Patty McCord, who was our head of human resources at the time, to say, how do you scale this beyond 200? How do you scale it to 2,000? How do you scale it to 7,000 where they are now? And that, I think, is part of the ongoing Netflix culture experiment, which is how do you create this freedom, this culture of freedom and responsibility, this culture of radical honesty, but not just in a small company, but in fact in a very, very large one.
Jason Fried is the co-founder and CEO of Basecamp and best-selling author of Rework and It Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work. With the blurring of work and life, it can be quite challenging to make sure that work just doesn't take everything over. And as you will hear in the following clip, Jason believes that 40 hours is more than enough to get everything done. In fact, this is the limit for how many hours his employees can actually work. This keeps his team engaged, happy, productive, and wanting to come back to work.
40 hours is enough because that's our limit. And what we do is if we can't get things done in 40 hours, we don't do them. Or we wait till the next day or the next week or whatever it is. And the idea is that what's flexible is scope, meaning our ambition, the work we take on, that's all flexible. If you just keep piling more hours into something, well, you might as well just go to 24 and never sleep. I mean, like it doesn't work. You've got to draw the line somewhere. We draw the line at 8. And then we just say, if we can't get to it today, we'll get to it tomorrow. If we can't get to it tomorrow, maybe we just decide not to do it, or we'll do it next week or the month after or 6 weeks from now or whatever it might be. We don't have to take on everything we want to do and try and get it done immediately. So it's this sense of pace, of a sustainable pace, I should say. And we've been in business for 20 years. We want to be in business for 20 more. You can't work 80-hour weeks. If you want to be in business for a long time. Sometimes you're going to burn out. You're going to burn people out. It's going to be very difficult. Hey, maybe you can do it, but it's not going to be pleasurable. It's not going to be enjoyable. You're not going to keep a good team together with you for a long period of time. And you're going to lose a lot of great people along the way. And I don't want to lose great people. It's hard enough to find great people. So I want to keep them happy with reasonable work hours, challenging work, great people, great environment, and those kinds of things. And so, getting everything done is not the idea. That's not the idea for us. It's getting what we can get done in 8-hour days and 40-hour weeks, over the course of many years. That's what we're aiming for. And I know that's not what a lot of companies do, but I really don't care what they do, because if you're supporting or celebrating, quote, work ethic, and work ethic to you means just spend as many hours on stuff as you can, like that's not really a good definition of work ethic to me. Work ethic is, do I want to, do people want to work with me? Do I work well with others? Do I give good feedback? Do I take good feedback? Am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing when I'm supposed to be doing it? If I say I'm going to do something, do I do it? It's those kinds of things, not how many hours you put in. How many hours you put in is simply how many hours you put in. It has nothing to do at all, zero, with how much you get done or the quality of your work. So I'm not interested in measuring hours beyond a reasonable workday. And then equating extra hours to extra work. You could spend extra hours on bad work. You can spend extra hours on unnecessary work. You can spend extra hours doing things that don't matter. You can spend extra hours on busy work. I mean, how is that something to reward? I'd like people to put a good day's work in and go home and do their own thing, get a great night's sleep, and come back rested and refreshed the next day. That's what's celebrated here and what's rewarded here. So yeah, it's a slightly different take, but not really. I mean, this is how most European countries work. This is how a lot of wonderful economies work around the world. So this isn't that unusual, actually. It's just kind of unusual in the United States with our, work hustle culture. That's just, I think, really damaging and really destroying people over the long term. And I know that, hey, sometimes when you're in your early 20s, you want to put all hours in and you want to bust your ass and the whole thing. I get it. But the thing is that it's not sustainable. And when you have companies that encourage that kind of behavior, when those companies themselves know it's not sustainable, that's almost fraudulent. And I just don't want to be that kind of company.
David Coady is the former chairman and CEO of Honeywell, and author of the best-selling book, Winning Now, Winning Later: How Companies Can Succeed in the Short Term While Investing for the Long Term. During his time at Honeywell, David fixed a toxic work culture and grew the company's market capitalization from around $20 billion to $120 billion, delivering returns of 100%. When David was younger, he had no sense of purpose or direction. He was a college dropout and a self-described loser. But he turned it all around and became the CEO of one of the most successful companies in the world. What was his formula for success? Here's David to explain. I know that there are a lot of people who are listening and watching who, similar situation. They're frustrated in their careers. Maybe they feel stuck. They feel like there's not a very clear progression to go forward. What is it that allowed you to kind of see that there is a path forward? I mean, do you have any advice for people who maybe were in that similar position that you were in? What would you tell them?
Yeah, I guess I would. I'd bucket it into a couple of different areas. The first one is you have to have performance, and your performance can't just be okay. It's got to be like top 10%. So you have to look at it and say, okay, am I performing that way? Because I always used to say where someone went to school, all that kind of stuff, that just made a difference with their first job. After that, they had to perform.
Yes.
And not just, make your commitments and be like everybody else, but you have to be a standout in your numbers and your performance. The second one is you need visibility. Somebody needs to see it, somebody who can do something about your career. Now, you have to be careful. You don't want to wear your ambition on your sleeve, as the old saying goes, constantly be tooting your own horn, talking about how great you are. But if you're in a position where nobody can see what it is you're doing, then that's going to hurt your advancement.
Yes.
Now, when it comes to a more personal side of it, two things I would point to there, and kind of a takeoff on what we just talked about. But some people think they're performing and their boss doesn't quite agree or thinks what they're doing is average compared to everybody else. And it's very easy for people to get sucked into the idea that as far as they're concerned, they're doing a great job. If their boss doesn't think they're doing a great job, then it's probably not going to get them very far. So people really need to re-examine, is it that I have a truly bad boss, which does happen, not as often as people think, but it does happen, or is it me? Then the second piece of it, and a bit tied into this, is you have to be self-aware and you have to be a learner. And when I say self-aware, this is something that whether you're dealing with a particular situation and what's the best way to handle it, or what are the things that about you that you need to be aware of that are issues for you, both end up being important. Because if you say, okay, I have a certain management style, this is what I use everywhere, and everybody has to adapt to me, you're probably not going to be as successful as if you can figure out, okay, how do I motivate each of the people that works for me in a way that works for them? Then when it comes to understanding yourself, this is one that takes some introspection. It's painful and it can take time. And I can say that it was when I was about 40 years old before some of those things finally dawned on me. And I'll give you the big one was I've been told since my first appraisal that I could be defensive, to which I would say, no, I'm not recognizing the irony of that. And then when I realized the irony of it, I used to take more words to explain how my boss was incorrect. But I was about 40 again, and I was in this meeting with a bunch of peers. And one guy said something, I responded to him, and he said, geez, Dave, don't be so defensive. And I thought, okay, this is a chance to finally allay this misperception. And I turned to another friend of mine and said, so, do you consider me defensive? And he said, nah, Dave, I wouldn't say you're defensive, but, I would say that if we say something negative about your organization and we're not 100% correct, you will rip our lips off. And I just, wow. Okay, well, this is something I got to be aware of. So from that point on, and I can't say I had no relapses, but I became a lot more aware of it and said, if I'm going to make good decisions, I need to make sure people are a lot more comfortable with always telling me things, whether I like it or not, whether they're right or not. I have to learn to make sure that I have the right people around me who'll tell me, and I have to make sure that I control my own emotions so that I don't react defensively.
Yeah,
As I tell people, everybody's got them. You all got issues. You have to figure out what they are. And I always say it's a 4-block. There's like good advice, bad advice. You take it, you don't take it. Because not everything people tell you is going to be correct. They may just have an axe to grind. But you got to maximize the good advice you take and the bad advice you reject.
Kate Johnson is the president of Microsoft US, a $45 billion division, including all of Microsoft's solutions, services, and support revenues across public and private sectors in the United States. Kate is responsible for a team of 10,000 people, and she is currently very involved in Microsoft's culture journey led by CEO Satya Nadella. Kate is a huge believer and practitioner of leading with courage and empathy. But what does that mean, and how does it come to life? Here is what Kate had to say.
For me, courage is, the willingness to take the leap, to take the risk, and own all the consequences. And the reason why it's so important is because there's just so much going on. That the world is changing so much that if we just look for places where we don't need courage and we can just be comfortable, then we're really not going to rise up to the challenge. I certainly, as a change leader, wouldn't be rising to the challenge of what my job requires for success. And one of the things that we've been learning is the connection between courage and vulnerability. So everybody thinks of, if you're courageous, you have no weakness.
Yeah.
You are strong. They picture warriors, with lots of armor and, heading off. That's not what courageous leadership is. Courageous leadership is, the willingness to activate the troops and own the outcome, but also to do so, bringing all of your strengths and weaknesses to the table with total transparency and clarity, and kind of owning up to that and figuring out how to assemble, the team to bolster wherever there are weaknesses. And that's a different kind of leadership that I think is essential today. It's no secret that I've asked Brene Brown to help my division build courageous leaders. And we started with the top 140 leaders inside of Microsoft US, and we're rolling it out to the rest of the organization in the second half of our fiscal year. The reason why I thought we needed courageous leadership was really, really simple. Last year, when I was bringing together new leaders, we had together decided that we were going to go through these learning journeys together. I think one of the ways to build really tight teams is to learn stuff together, because if you're learning, then you're vulnerable. If you learn it together, it builds connective tissue. And we went to Montgomery, Alabama, and we met with Brian Stevenson, the famed Harvard attorney who just dedicated his life to serving those less fortunate, and has freed hundreds of people from death row who were wrongfully convicted. He's argued at the Supreme Court 5 times, won 4 of them, I believe. We spent a couple hours with him. We all read his book, and then we studied race in the United States. And it was shocking and horrifying that most of us hadn't learned it in school. This notion of the history of Black and African Americans in the United States and this profound racism that they've experienced. And we just didn't have the knowledge that we should. That's the first thing. Second thing is, all of us felt really compelled to learn more and to do something about it, because the truth is, if racism is prevalent in the United States, then it's probably true of our company, because with 150,000 employees, we're like a little mini microcosm of that population, right? And for sure, that is the case. So, what can we do to continue to learn? So I asked Brian to come and speak at our sales kickoff. So much to my surprise and glee, he received 2 standing ovations in front of our entire Microsoft US organization with all of our partners. And he talked about really raw topics, really hard topics, all rooted in the reality of African and Blacks in the United States. And what happened was he opened up part of our brain to this. And inside the company, we started talking about race more. But what I noticed is we were not really knowing what to do with those conversations. Okay, so I'm talking about it. I'm learning about it. I'm starting to learn what empathy for race means, but I don't know how to take it to the next level. We decided to go to watch his movie Just Mercy together as an organization. So we took 7,000 of us to the movies on January 6th of 2020, and 2 p.m. local time across 42 theaters across the country. We watched the movie together. It was an incredibly moving experience and an important moment. But again, it was a big stage moment to say this is important for us to learn together. But the same thing happened. We created all these channels of communication, and then we didn't know what to do. And then when we found ourselves working from home during the pandemic, and all of the atrocities of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and all of the other racism, rooted in violence tragedies happened, I felt like we really needed to do something. So I started this calling campaign across the sub and talked to several people, some of them being formal advisors and others just being employees who I knew would give it to me straight and said, what would you do if you were me? What should we do next? And it was, we need to learn how to have difficult conversations to get to a place of not just better understanding, but what do we do next? Right? So I called Brene Brown and I said, can you help me? I've got to figure out, how to bring courageous leadership to Microsoft US. And she said, well, it's 4 skills. Read my book, Dare to Lead. And, I said, I already have, and that's why we want you. And so she's been helping us figure out how to navigate through the difficult conversations, how to rumble through the tough topics, how to build an inclusive environment where you're listening to all perspectives, and then how to build trust from that in a way that's lasting and endurable. And I think most importantly, how to actually build resilience in an organization as a team as you go through these really sort of troubling and trying times. And that's why I think it's important for courageous leadership. That's why we needed it inside of Microsoft US and why I made the investment to do it.
Tiger Tyagarajan is the CEO of Genpact, a global professional services firm with 100,000 employees that drives digital-led innovation and digitally enabled intelligent operations for organizations around the world. Prior to Genpact, Tiger worked for several well-known companies such as Unilever, Citibank, and GE. He was actually one of the industry leaders who pioneered a new global business model and transformed a division of GE into Genpact back in 2005. Tiger has some great perspectives and insights on how COVID has changed leadership forever and what this change means for you.
At the leadership team level, we've always been a very, high percentage virtual leadership team. Mm-hmm. So if you take the top 100 leaders in the company, they're distributed across many cities in the world. There is no single office they work out of. Many of them actually don't work from offices, have never worked from offices. We get together in an office once in a while, but actually they're all distributed across. They spend a lot of time with clients. That's the nature of our business. So for us to do what we are doing today didn't require that much change to work with each other. Mm-hmm. The one change, of course, is we are unable to get together even that once in a while. Right? So every quarter we would get together as a team. Every month, a few of us would get together depending on where close tri-state area people would get together. The European team would get together. Even that is not possible now. I think the change is much bigger as you cascade down to 100,000 people. And as leaders, dealing with the 100,000 people, there's a lot of change. Clearly, my ability to go to an operating center with 10,000 people and spend time with that team for 3 days and immerse myself in that team and do big town halls is gone.
Yep.
So what have we done? We've done 3 or 4 things. We've dramatically increased the frequency of our virtual communication. And when I say dramatically increased, from once a quarter In some cases, global town hall once a quarter. Once a week, our leaders are now sending out video blogs. Once a month, we're doing global town halls. From global town halls having a participation rate physically of 7,000 people, we now have 20,000 people at least joining in on a combined video conference during a global town hall. The number of such interactions as you cascade down, the number of times I'm getting together with my team, gone up 5 times because all of it is virtual. So that's one big change. The second is, I think you've got to really empathize much more. As a leader, you need to empathize in any case. But in these times, empathy becomes incredibly important.
Yeah.
How do you empathize when you actually physically can't see the person other than through a video? How do you pick up body language? How do you pick up... By the way, there are a couple of benefits that the current situation has thrown up. It democratizes meetings dramatically. When you have 100 people all on video conference, everyone is equal. When you have 100 people in a meeting, but 30 of them are in one place, and the other 70 are distributed in 20 places, the 30 who are in one place actually take over the conversation.
Yep.
And the other 70 feel a little left out. That cannot happen. It's much more difficult, and therefore, I've had reactions from people say, I feel more included now than I used to. But if you think about a physical meeting, when people get into a room for a meeting, the first 5 minutes, they're greeting each other.
Yeah.
They're figuring out, okay, did you get caught in the rain? What happened last evening? All of those before people finally sit down and say, okay, let's start the meeting.
Yep.
In a video conference, if you're not careful, you flip the switch, everyone is in. And as a leader, you can jump in and start the meeting saying, what are the numbers?
Yeah.
Unless you pause and say, no, let's actually have some airtime on just shooting the breeze, talking about other things, understanding what's the mood of people. And you realize, oh,
yep,
this person is going to be stressed for this reason. So otherwise you would watch body language.
Yeah.
And say, John, what's happened? Why are you looking stressed? You can't see that now.
Carrie Burkhofer is president and CEO of Bay Federal Credit Union, a nonprofit financial cooperative with 225 employees. She's been the CEO there for 25 years, and under her leadership, the credit union has grown from $70 million to $1.4 billion in assets. One of the things I loved most about my conversation with Carrie is how she really makes her employees feel like she is there to serve them and not the other way around. Now, more than ever, we need leaders who believe and practice this inside of their organizations.
So it starts with the training and the human resources team. So there's like 4 or 5 employees besides me. And we have them either come on Zoom or physically. We have a training room where they can sit apart, and some of my team are in there, and my team goes around and shares who they are, what their path has been at the credit union, kind of showing that there's career opportunities, and also something interesting that they want to share, either that's something that maybe they did that weekend or something that's going on in their life. And it's always fun to hear what those are. And then we have the employees, the new ones, give their same information, who they are, where they've come from, something interesting that they want to share. And then I go last because I don't want to influence the process. They don't really know who I am, I don't think, unless they've studied the credit union. So I then introduce myself, and I also share, my journey, where I've been, something interesting about me. But then I also share kind of our values and our management philosophy, and our commitment to culture, and how important that is to us. And I share with them also that it's really important that they understand that their role is to be a team player, that we've chosen them because we see something in them that shows that they have a good connection with people, because that's important in our business. And that it's not easy always to get hired at Bay Federal, because we screen for that. And so I share appreciation to them, and that it's great that they're here. Like, try and make them feel really excited about it. And also that as a CEO, that I do want to hear what they have to say, that they are valued as a person, that we listen and we care about them, that they have a voice, that I think it's important for a person to feel seen and heard. And so for a CEO to come in and say that to them on their first day, when it might be their first job at 19 years old as a teller, I see them light up, and I mentioned to them the culture and how it's different. Like in some retail organizations, you might walk in and you could tell employees are not engaged, and immediately you might turn around and walk out because you just don't get the vibe of being welcomed. And I said, we want you to feel welcomed, and we want you to welcome people when they come in. So I'm demonstrating that to them without kind of actually saying that, but that's the importance of it, is that we want to walk our talk. And then I follow up with them, because then I ask them if they have any questions, and they're a little intimidated. I could tell it's your first day, and I recognize that. And I say, don't worry about it. Gather your questions. If you have any, let me know. And then what my executive team and I do, I've got 2 executive vice presidents. We take, and I tell them this, that you'll have a chance to ask us questions when you've been here for a little while. About a month or 2 later, we take them to lunch, and we used to do it physically. Now we do it over Zoom, and we order them DoorDash so they can order their lunch. And we check in with them and we ask them, how is it going? You heard me speak on that first morning when you came in, and you've had a chance to be here for a couple of months. How are you doing? And what questions do you have now? And then the conversation's much different. Now they feel excited to be part of the team. They're acclimated, and they have a lot of questions, and we have a great conversation with them.
The world of work is changing, and a big part of that change is creating better employee experiences by transforming manual ways of working into digital workflows. Thankfully, ServiceNow does just that. Find out why they are trusted by over 6,200 enterprise customers and how you can create better experiences for your people at servicenow.com. Steve Bilt is the CEO of Smile Brands, a company with 5,000 employees that provides business support services to over 425 dental offices. Smile Brands has been on Glassdoor's Best Places to Work list 3 times, and Steve is one of the top CEOs on Glassdoor. Steve and his company have won more awards than probably any other company I've interviewed, and it all started with creating a mission that employees could get behind. As Steve will share in just a moment, when you move from a people-centric vision to a profit-centric vision, you're asking for a bit of trouble.
I spent my early years running the business, connecting with our doctors and our teams, understanding what made them tick and what they needed from the business. And we would distill that down into, as you know, I love 3-word phrases. So we distill that down into various 3-word phrases. One of those was smiles for everyone. And, I wear that on my wrist. We talk about it all the time. We talk about this concept of a virtuous circle, which is every one of our constituents getting a fair deal from us, whether that's patients, employees, providers, our vendors, our community, our investors. And we took that really seriously and pursued that win-win around all 6 of those axes pretty relentlessly. When I left or was asked to leave, the company tried to move to a much more kind of execution-oriented, nothing wrong with that, but less personal, mission-driven style or touch. And I think it was because the people who ran it behind me didn't necessarily understand that we were really serious about that. Like when we evaluate a deal, we just say, look, is this going to be good for you? And is it going to be good for us? I was just on the phone today with someone saying, I'm not sensing by your body language that you feel like this is a good deal for you. It's a good deal for us, but if you don't feel good for you, shouldn't do this. That's Smiles for Everyone. And the guy was like, wow, that is great to hear. And let me clear that up. And so we had a great conversation with that basis. And we think that way with all of our employees, our patients, and everyone. That becomes part of your DNA as a culture. And when you take that away and replace it by saying, well, we can do better if this metric's higher or this metric moves further downfield, a company like ours just loses its soul, if you will, or loses its heart. And it's amazing because everything about our business is that last 5% or that little extra mile. And you think about it, it's true of anything that you put your hands on. You think about your book, right? If you didn't care deeply about the outcome, you could have got to the page count a lot faster.
Oh, yeah.
And you probably would have went through a lot less rewrites and scrapped a lot less content to find other kind of, and that's what matters, that extra work through the lunch break, that stay an extra half hour to make sure that patient gets their care. But when you're in a business, multi-site, 400 and some odd locations, going after 4 or 5% same store growth, if I tell you someone stayed through lunch, a doctor, to get a case done, or stayed an extra half hour to finish a case, that's not 5%, that's like 10, 12%.
Yeah.
Right? But it all comes down to that, people really caring, and then you showing them that you care about them. So that was taken away. And so to answer your question, when I came back to the company, I went around and talked to, I think it was 1,500 people live out of our group. Wow. And we'd be in rooms, and sitting there, this is back at the time you actually sat in the same room with each other. It's a long time ago, but you sat in the same room with each other. And they would say, hey, are we serious about this bringing Smiles for Everyone back? And I'd say, of course we are. I said, so we can wear the wristbands again? And I kid you not, like, I'm wearing one of these, right? I always do every day. People would literally, they came to the meeting, they go, oh, thank goodness. They'd pull them out of their pocket and put them on and say, I've been saving this for this day. I was gone for 2.5 years. People were saving those in Destroy, hiding them for when I hopefully came back. And so that was the biggest thing. And people always kind of scratch their head and go, really? And don't get me wrong, there were lots of tactical things that had changed that had to be adjusted back. But none of those could have been adjusted back until the spirit or the culture was back.
And just so I was flipping through the page in the book where I talk about this. And so it went from Smiles for Everyone, and then they changed it to give providers and their dental teams the freedom to put patients first so that they can become the most preferred dental office in their community. So somebody might read that and say, okay, well, that's not terrible, right? No. It's not bad. Why did that not resonate as much with your people, with your customers, as Smiles for Everyone?
So you're correct. It's not bad. There's nothing wrong with what they were saying. Now, I would say my critique of it was that that's not exactly a pithy statement that just rolls off the tongue.
It's not.
It doesn't fit on a wristband either, which is a big problem for me, or as a 3-word slogan on a shirt or a name tag. But the bigger problem with that was we had set our entire culture around sitting down and checking in to our mission statement. We started every meeting saying this meeting is about moving us closer to our vision of delivering smiles for everyone. And here's how it happens. And then when we were working with people, we would check in and say, are we moving together towards Smiles for Everyone? And by the way, you know who gets to evaluate that for you? You.
Yeah.
And who evaluates it for me? Me. When you start talking about what I can't remember the entire thing you just said because I sort of block it out, but putting providers in a position to be the preferred provider in their community, you don't really roll that off the tongue and say, hey, am I putting you in a position to be the preferred provider in your community? So it becomes a statement that exists on a wall or a shelf, but it's not breathing. It doesn't have a pulse. Yeah. And so the way we do it, now again, if we just put the 3 words on the wall and didn't talk to them, it wouldn't matter anyway. But we keep it really short and tight so we can check in and say, are we doing this? Are we moving closer to this? And that just became part of our DNA. And when you move to that generic thing that could be any dental company.
Hubert Joly is the former chairman and CEO of Best Buy. Currently, he is a professor at Harvard Business School, and he's on the board of 2 companies, Johnson & Johnson and Ralph Lauren. The lesson that you will learn from Hubert today is that while many leaders view cutting people as a way to save costs, Hubert views people as the solution, not the problem.
I have this turnaround manual because I've done a few of those as I laid out. And yes, I'm not the cut guy. I'm a big believer that in business, So you have three imperatives in business. One is the people imperative. You need to have good people, well-trained, well-equipped. Then you have the customer or business imperative. You need to have happy customers to whom you sell, compelling services. And then of course, you have a financial imperative, which is you need to make money. But the financial performance is an outcome of excellence on the customer imperative, which itself is an outcome of excellence on the people imperative. So it's people, business, finance. And you treat profit as an outcome, not as your singular focus. In fact, when we presented in November, so 2 months after I joined to the street, a Renew Blue plan, we had all of the stakeholders. Everybody talks about stakeholders now. So we had the customers, we had the employees, we had the vendor partners with these idea of partnerships. We had the shareholders, of course, we care about them. And then we had continued to be good citizens in the world. So we took care of all of the stakeholders. And then from a turnaround standpoint, I believe that there's 4 levers in a turnaround. Number 1, grow the revenue line. It's amazing what growing the revenue can do. If you shrink, there's no cost takeout that will get you out of trouble. So 1 is grow the revenue. It's got to be focused on the customers and the employees. Then, of course, you're going to cut cost because oftentimes you need to do that. And at Best Buy, we did. But the first priority around cost is what I call non-salary expenses. So all of the costs in the P&L that are not related to people, which at most companies, it's 70 or 80% of the cost structure. So let me give you an example of what we did there. So at Best Buy, let's agree, we sell a lot of TVs, right? And they're big, they're thin, so they're fragile. So we break a lot of TVs, either between the manufacturers in our warehouses or between the warehouses and the stores, or maybe the customers also break them on the way to their home if we don't deliver it to them. So let's imagine, pick a number, we sell $10 or $15 billion worth of TVs. Let's imagine we break 2% of them. That's a lot of TVs that are broken. So if we can reduce the TV junk out, as we called it, this is a saving. Same with returns. 10% of what we sell comes back. That's bad news from nobody wants to buy something and have to return it. So if you can reduce that, so that's non-salary expenses. The third priority is optimize benefits. So a rising cost for most companies in this country and around the world is healthcare cost.
Yeah.
So how can you work to foster greater wellness amongst the employees so that you can reduce their healthcare cost? And then if 1 + 2 + 3 is not sufficient, then you go after headcount. But that's as a last resort. And you're not necessarily going to start with cutting on the front line. You may actually cut first at headquarters. You want to delayer. And to the extent that you're going to reduce positions, you also try to redeploy, because you have turnover in a company.
Yeah.
And so you can actually redeploy. So, you don't treat human beings as the source of the problem. You treat human beings as the source of the solution. And you treat headcount reduction not as a victory, but as a last resort.
Jim Heppelmann is the CEO of PTC, a technology software company with 6,500 employees in 30 countries. Jim was named one of 7 IoT leaders to watch in 2017 by Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. He was recognized as IoT CEO of the Year by Postscapes and Technology CEO of the Year by the Massachusetts Technology Leadership Council. There's always been this traditional mentality that leaders need to have a long-term plan and stick to it. But Jim's lesson is that leaders actually need to have short attention spans if they want to thrive in today's rapidly changing world.
There is sometimes a joke here that about the time Jim's getting bored with something, it really starts to work. And maybe it's because, my attention span isn't that long. So I try to be patient, but I'd also tell you, having a CEO who's a little impatient and let's say without a super long attention span, I think it's a good thing. I've been CEO for 10 years now. And the biggest problem with CEOs at my level of tenure is they just become entrenched in old thinkings. They made some decision 5 years ago, or maybe even 8 years ago. And for a couple of years, they improved it a little bit. And then they've just spent the last 5 years telling everybody why it works and we're not going to change it. And I'm a little bit of a different cut. I say, hey, we did this, we improved it, it's working, but we got to think about what's next. And let's not wait until it's not working to think about what's next. Let's, some of us, start thinking about what we're going to do next, even while this is still working pretty well. And that's why I joke that, sometimes people say, he's getting bored, so it's really going to start working. And it really means that, it's starting to stabilize and I'm starting to think about what's next, because my personality just doesn't have the patience to just ride success. I'm always looking for the next round of changes that would, make us even better, or perhaps protect us from some new threat that's headed our way, technology disruption or whatever. So I think it's a good quality, actually, in a CEO.
Chris McCann is the CEO of 1-800-Flowers, a floral and gourmet food gift retailer and distribution company with over 3,000 employees. The company was started back in 1976 when Chris's older brother opened his first flower shop. In the 1980s, Chris joined his brother in the business, and they have been working together ever since. Chris was named to the National Retail Federation's The List of People Shaping Retail's Future in 2018. Chris didn't learn leadership skills by attending a top-tier university. Chris learned how to lead by those he surrounded himself with. Sometimes the best leadership lessons can come from those around you. And that is the lesson that we should take away from Chris.
Jim brought a mantra to our business from what he learned as a social worker. And he tells a story that, again, these were really tough teenage kids from the streets of New York that he was dealing with. And if he wanted to connect with them and get to help them, he realized he needed to build a relationship with them first. So he created this mantra that rolls into our company: you build a relationship first, you do business second. So that was really the beginning. Whether it's with a customer, whether it's with an employee, you need to understand and learn about these people and how to connect with them, and do so in a very honest, transparent manner. I've also been fortunate. I did take a leadership course then later on, an executive leadership course at Cornell University, which I found very helpful. But also along the way, out of this process of building relationships, Jim and I were both very fortunate to build relationships with some of the most enigmatic business leaders of our time. One in particular is Jamie Dimon, who heads up J.P. Morgan. Jamie also grew up in Queens, and we got to know Jamie throughout our life, and we would spend time with him from time to time and just absorb and listen to the way he thinks about things and soak everything in. I remember one of the most important things that Jamie said to us at one point was, he said, you guys spend way too much time trying to get everybody in the company to understand how the whole business works. He says, and you can't. Not everybody's going to understand that. He said, but what they need to understand is how what they do connects to the company's success. And he said, because people want to go home from their job every day knowing whether or not they contributed to success. They're not just in there to punch the clock. And that was a transforming thing for us, is to really make sure that when we do this now, and I really think it helps with leadership, is to make sure everybody understands. They don't need to understand the whole picture. You just need your senior management team to understand that. Everybody else needs to really understand how their piece contributes. My brother and I often said that, we got our MBA by meeting these different people that we got the opportunity to learn from as we did business with them throughout. Another great leader that I learned a lot from is a gentleman, Ed Miller, who was CEO of AXA Financial, and prior to that, he led manufacturers Hanover, the integration with Chemical Bank and into Chase Bank. Just a great leader. And as we were growing in our company, we had people that were with us for a long time, and sometimes you run into a situation where the job outgrows the person. But yet the person was very loyal to you and very important in growing the business early on. And letting that person go would be very, very difficult to do. And I remember having conversations with Ed about this. And he said, you're not being loyal to that person. I said, well, I sure am. I'm keeping them in their job. He said, no, loyalty is making sure that every person on your team is in a position to succeed, whether inside your company or outside your company. So if a job has outgrown someone and you don't have a position in your company, it's your responsibility to do everything you can to get them the right job outside of your company. And that really transformed the way I thought about people.
Jim McKelvey is the co-founder of Square and the author of a new book called The Innovation Stack, Building an Unbeatable Business One Crazy Idea at a Time. Lots of people are going through a time of reinvention, and having the mindset of an entrepreneur can be an invaluable asset. Whether you're an entrepreneur inside of a company or someone who is building your own business, Jim's lesson is don't start by focusing on the money.
If you just want to make money, don't be an entrepreneur. Like if you want to make money, just do a business, build a business. And businesses are great because you can copy them. Okay. So if you want to be a successful person and make a lot of money, entrepreneurship is a low percentage shot. Okay. Yeah. You know, and I would say business by far, because you know you can do businesses that make money all day long. Yeah. And do that. And if you ever have trouble, you can go to other people who are in the same business who can tell you where you're making a mistake. Much, much better. If you want to be an entrepreneur, then it's a different set of rules.
What are some of the rules for being an entrepreneur?
Well, the first is you can't be an expert.
Interesting. Okay.
And what I mean by that is, and this is actually one of the reasons I wrote the book, is that I see a lot of smart, capable people who disqualify themselves from even trying to solve a problem because they feel unqualified. And because they're unqualified, they've immediately equated that with, and therefore I shouldn't do it. And that's almost always right, but in one case it's not. So I'll give you an example. Let's say I want to fly a plane. Okay, I want to go out and fly a plane. All right, well, I have to get qualified to fly a plane. If I want to get certificated, I got 40 hours of solo work. I got to do all this work and then pass these tests. And then the FAA will give me this endorsement that allows me to fly a plane. Okay, I can be qualified to fly a plane. And if I'm not qualified, I shouldn't fly a plane. But that doesn't apply to Orville Wright. Like the first pilot, I don't know if it was Orville or Orville or Wilbur, but it was one of the Wright brothers who had to be the first pilot in the world. And by definition, there was no way he could be qualified to be a pilot because there were no pilots. We didn't know what the requirements were. So he just had to get in and figure it out in the air. And so if you're an entrepreneur by the traditional definition and you're doing something that hasn't been done, then the fact that you feel unqualified to do what you're doing is just table stakes. Like everyone is unqualified to do what you're doing. Nobody is qualified to do something that has never been done before because nobody's done it. We don't know what the qualifications are. You may have them. And so the reason I wrote the book is I see these smart people, I see these bright, capable people who have been so indoctrinated into this way of thinking that they have to be qualified before they start, that they never start. And look, that's an appropriate feeling, except in the case of you're doing something new, in which case that feeling of being unqualified, that's not the reason to give up. Look, Jack and I were completely unqualified to start Square. I mean, zero qualifications and payments, zero, right?
You learned everything from scratch.
Absolutely. You know, the world's biggest bank was built by a guy who dropped out of high school at 14 and was a produce vendor. Like he wasn't an accountant or a lawyer. He sold lettuce. Builds the biggest bank in the world. What you think of as banking today was invented by a guy who used to sell produce.
Per Uhlenhammer is the former CEO of Volvo and has been voted Sweden's most admired man 9 times. He became the CEO of Volvo when he was just 35 years old, and he led the company for 24 years. Per had to lead his company through lots of tough times like recessions and an oil crisis. While all the other companies were sacrificing their people to save their profits, Per didn't let go of a single employee. In fact, he told me he would rather let go of a white-collar worker in a management role than a blue-collar worker working on the manufacturing floor. Per's lesson is really all about appreciating all of the people who work with and for you, and remembering that it's oftentimes the people on the front lines who make your business successful. Well, of course, I have to ask you. There's a lot that's going on now with the coronavirus, with the current pandemic, and I saw you wrote a couple. You wrote a couple of articles as well.
Yes.
So, what is your general thought? What's happening with the pandemic, and how are organizations and leaders responding to it? Are you happy with it?
No, I'm not. It's very difficult to be happy with a pandemic where people die left, right, and center, and where we see no end, because there are those who are in science who say that don't be too optimistic. This will come back. There will be a second wave later this summer or in the early autumn. So I have matured a little bit when I'm only 85. and I take it with resilience, but I think it's a very dangerous pandemic, and that it may come back in the mid to late summer. So, but I have, in the meantime, I have communications with people around the world. I'm on the phone most of the time and on my iPad, and I don't have good feelings about the pandemic. I think it's one of the most dangerous things since probably before World War One.
Wow.
That I wasn't there yet in World War One. I was there in World War Two. And I was a child when World War II started. But I try now to do my best in writing, communicating, understanding where the world is, and it's a different way of attacking things. But I'm pleased with it so far.
What about as far as how leaders are responding? You know, business leaders for their organizations. Do you think they're doing a good enough job of putting their people ahead of profits?
No.
So what?
I think there are quite a few, or perhaps only a few, who would not put profits before people. But I put people before profits in the sense that if I don't have good people, we could not have productivity. We could not go to have our aspirations come true unless we have good people. So I have people before profits, and it's not declining profits. I think that profits are very important for any shareholder company, and that the shareholder should have their part, of course, but that the people will create it.
Yeah, no, totally agree. And I think in a recent CNN article, you were, I think, particularly critical of U.S. firms, saying that they were not doing a very good job of looking after their people and putting people first. So I don't know if you can you share a little bit more about that. What would you like to see specifically American firms do that they're not doing as far as taking care of their people?
Well, I think that the fact that when you get to a recession or a downturn, they lay off people.
Yes.
And they do it brutally. So they just say, X hundreds or thousands, you have to go. And that's it. And they get no remuneration. They get no praise. And it's very cold-blooded. I don't like that.
Yeah.
And I have, in recessions, I have saved not really my blue-collar workers, because they are the most vulnerable. And I think they're the most vulnerable in the United States as well. And you can just dispose of them. And I have always rejected that and always cared for not least my blue-collar workers. Because the white-collar people, they feel safe anyway. Even if they are not, they feel safe because they're always saved, whereas the blue-collar workers go.
Yeah.
And many of them have workplaces that are boring, monotonous, and where they get injured because of the high pace. And it's not the high pace in the production. It's a high pace for the individual people that have very short job cycles. And they get injured and they get bored. And both are bad, because if they get bored, they leave. If they think that they have other jobs to make and to do. And they get also very often injured, because if you do a thing for 90-second cycle, it's nothing. It's nothing. Everything is just, you are gradually injured and incapacitated. So I started production, looking for the health of the laborers, and went to 20-minute cycle instead of a 1.5 minute cycle, and that worked extremely well. They were motivated, they were great, they learned much more things, and they were quite proud of it. So I continued on that way 3 years after I started with Volvo.
I don't know if you've seen any of the news, but here in the Bay Area where I live, Uber has been in the news quite a bit.
Yes.
Laying off many thousands. I think a couple of months ago they laid off 2,000. Now it's another 3,000.
Yes.
And I read an article, I think it was yesterday, that a lot of leaders basically went to the CEO and they asked him, they said, look, please don't get rid of our jobs. We are willing to take a pay cut, and our teams are willing to take a pay cut so that we can keep our jobs. Would you consider that? And in the article, he said the answer is no. And now there's a lot of articles that are coming out that basically are saying that he's just Travis Kalanick 2.0. Like he's doing the same thing that the former CEO did. And it's really crazy to me to hear these types of stories. But you've also had to deal with tough times, with recessions, with economic downturns. So how did you deal with it?
Well, I dealt with it so that I wanted the blue-collar worker to stay. They were loyal, and I thought that over time they would probably be pleased to not have been laid off. So I hardly ever had any layoffs. I had more layoffs on white-collar people that I didn't like because they were not productive. So if anybody would be laid off, it would be white-collar workers or high officials that didn't perform. I didn't understand the philosophy that we had and that I had for the company. So with the blue-collar workers, they were saved and they were extremely grateful. And towards later in my career at Volvo, I got there was a poll, from outside, what the workers and what the employees in Volvo thought about the leadership. And the blue-collar workers had 90% plus approval of their workplace.
Robert Glazer is the best-selling author of Elevate, Push Beyond Your Limits and Unlock Success in Yourself and Others. He's also the CEO of Acceleration Partners, a 13-year-old company that manages affiliate and partner marketing programs for a lot of well-known brands like Adidas, LinkedIn, Target, and others. He leads a team of hundreds of employees, but they're all remote. The lesson from Robert is how he manages to create and scale an amazing culture for a workforce that actually doesn't work together in person.
So the weekly call, we do core value shout outs. I liken our organization a little bit to kind of the Navy SEALs, if you think about it, or sort of the military, and particularly in client services. And this analogy is not going where you think it's going. But the Navy SEALs has an ethos, right? They have a purpose, they operate, and they have this training. But you spend 90% of your time with your unit. So we have client service pods and operational teams that are sort of the same thing. Those teams are actually out on the road together. They're at client events. They're traveling. They're really like together a lot. And you talk. Most of your experience is related to your kind of immediate team and manager. So when we're talking about the high level things, whether it's that weekly call or biannual meeting or annual meeting, the all company stuff, but we're clear about making sure that all of those pods kind of follow the traditions and norms. But you do spend 80% of your time, with that team of 8 to 10 people, and they develop even their own culture within that, but it's all aligned, right? So I think that's where a lot of their camaraderie, that's the people you're jumping on and doing the client call with, and then getting on video for 5 minutes after and talking about it, or going to do the in-person quarterly review with the client. So a lot of the day-to-day interaction happens in those smaller teams. And similar, right? This sort of military, you got there's like principles over time. Like an 8 can roll into 16, which can roll into a 32, and that's sort of how sociologically people are kind of managed within a group. I've had more people tell us that they have a stronger sense of culture at our company than they had at any in-person place. So those things are true around collaboration. The flip side of what you just said is that people are distracted all day long. They're interrupted when they're in their REM work. The great open office experiment has almost been completely debunked now, that like open office, people are putting on their headphones and noise canceling headphones because open office is so distracting. Jason Fried from 37 Signals, wrote in his book years ago, I think, this REM work. You have these 2 to 3 hours a day where you can get 90% of your good work done.
Yeah, he was also a guest. We talked about that too. So
yeah, and if you're interrupted constantly, then that's not good. So to me, culture is like, what is it that you value? What are the behaviors and systems that you value? So if we repeat that, if we train on that, if we get people in on that, like Embrace Relationships, one of the things people tell us, they start and they get pinged from all these people on Slack or otherwise, like, hey, welcome. Can I help you? What do you need? Also, you pass a lot of people in the office. You talk to them. You have superficial conversations. Our AP Summit that we do goes extremely deep. Like, we take those 3 days. This year, we brought in a guy, Philip McKernan, might have had him on too. He's unbelievable. He has this initiative called One Last Talk. We had 4 employees give their one last talk to the entire company. So what is the talk you would give if you were leaving the world tomorrow? And Philip's one of these guys who does not let you hide from, you come and say, oh, the 3 tips. And he's like, that's not your talk. Like, what is your talk? These were deeply emotional, personal stories that explained how these people showed up at work. The vulnerability and the sharing that happened over the next 24 hours was at a depth I could not possibly explain. People worked together for 5 years, started having conversations, and I said, I never know this person at all in this way. So those are the type of experiences that we try to create when we're together, that form really deep and meaningful bonds that I do think carry on a lot throughout the rest of the year. I think it's all these things that are intentional. We're the culture is the values. You want to know what a culture is? Is this values? That how people behave? So we reward and we punish, not to use that word, own it, embrace relationships, and excel and improve, plus getting results for our clients. If those are the things that you love, that's what we support. That's what we talk about every day. The problem with values and culture sometimes is people, they read them and they say, oh, I love own it. But I try to really be like, here's how we mean own it. You say you love own it, but then you come in, you make a mistake, and I read your brief that you wrote on the mistake to share with other people, and you blamed everyone else for it. So not really own it. I generally think, we have this excel and improve. If I took you through all of these things, how we do the core values, how we do the training, how we do the meeting, I think it's just more of this level of commitment and excellence to do all of this stuff well and be consistent. Like I said, we're not for anyone. If people come in and they don't like the company or it's not a fit, and we're not for everyone. We're not a great place to work for everyone. We're a great place to work for like 2% of the people, and we're trying to find them. And that's fine. Just like some people like a city school and, a big city school, and other people like a rural college, like they wouldn't like the other college. They're both great colleges, but there's something that you're looking for that's a better fit for you.
Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode on 15 top leadership lessons learned from 2020. Just to recap, here are the leadership lessons I want you to take away from these amazing leaders that you can apply inside of your organization and your life. Number 1 comes from Arthur Blank, the co-founder of the Home Depot. His lesson is lead by example and remember that no matter how senior you become inside of your company, you're never better than any other human being who works there. It's a great lesson for work and life. Number 2, from Shelley Archambault, the former CEO of MetricStream. Create your own luck. Take more control over your personal and professional life and make things happen instead of leaving them up to chance. Number 3, from Mark Randolph, the co-founder and founding CEO of Netflix. Culture isn't what you say or put in a culture deck. It's all about how you act, how you are, and the things you do. Number 4 comes from Jason Fried, the co-founder and CEO of Basecamp. 40 hours a week is more than enough time to get everything done. Don't burn yourself or your people out. It might seem like productivity in the short run, but it leads to disaster in the long run. Number 5 is from David Cody, the former CEO of Honeywell. If you feel stuck in your role or job, remember to focus on performance, self-awareness, and getting visibility for the work you do. Leadership lesson number 6 comes from Kate Johnson, president of Microsoft US. Times are tough, and one of the most important things that you can do is to lead with courage and empathy. Number 7 comes from Tiger Tyagarajan, the CEO of Genpact. COVID has changed leadership forever, and you can't use the same old practices, skills, and mindsets from the past to lead people in the new world of work. Number 8 comes from Carrie Burkhofer, the president and CEO of Bay Federal Credit Union. As a leader, it's crucial to remember that your job, your responsibility, and indeed your privilege as a leader is to serve others and not to have others serve you. Number 9 comes from Steve Bilt, CEO of Smile Brands. Having a people-centric vision and mission that employees can get behind is a crucial foundation to put into place for business success. Leadership lesson number 10 comes from Hubert Joly, the former CEO of Best Buy. Don't view people as the problem that you need to cut. View people as the solution to whatever problem you are faced with and invest more in them, not less. Number 11 comes from Jim Heppelman, the CEO of PTC. For a leader, having a short attention span can actually be a good thing. Number 12 from Chris McCann, the CEO of 1-800-Flowers. The best leadership teacher can actually be the people you surround yourself with. You don't need an MBA from a fancy school to be a great leader. Number 13 comes from Jim McKelvey, the co-founder of Square. When it comes to reinventing yourself, it's crucial to think like an entrepreneur. But the most important thing here is to not start off by focusing on the dollars and cents. Number 14 comes from Per Eulenhammer, the former CEO of Volvo. Appreciate all of the people who work with and for you, and remember that it's oftentimes the people on the front lines who make your business successful. The last leadership lesson, number 15, comes from Robert Glazer. He is the CEO of Acceleration Partners. Just because you can't see your people in person doesn't mean that culture isn't important. In fact, in a virtual world, culture is more important than ever. I hope you can practice and take to heart these 15 leadership lessons inside of your company and in your personal life as well. And on a personal note, I just want to say thank you to all of you who listen to the show, who share the episodes, who send me emails and comments on social media. It really, really does mean a lot. I've now interviewed around 500 leaders from around the world thus far, and I'm looking forward to many, many more years of the future of work with Jacob Morgan. So stay safe, stay healthy, and stay happy. Welcome to 2021. And I'll see you next week. Thanks again for tuning into the Future of Work with Jacob Morgan. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please remember to follow me on Spotify, subscribe on Apple Podcasts or your favorite platform at futureofworkpodcast.com. And also, don't forget to check out my brand new podcast on entrepreneurship with my wife, Blake, at byobpodcast.com. If you want to reach out to me about sponsoring the show, or if you just have feedback for me, please send me an email, jacob@thefutureorganization.com. And of course, I would love a review or a rating on Apple Podcasts or whatever your preferred channel is.